thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jess Epston, and I lead the Band and C program at the Institute for Emerging Issues at NC State University. I will be your moderator for today's webinar, Carolina in My Mind, Using Storytelling to Strengthen Our Community. Many thanks to our amazing panelists for lending their expertise and to our IEI staff for all their help today with technology and moderating the chat. So this topic might be familiar for some of you all who attended the National Digital Inclusion Alliance Net Inclusion Conference this past February in Chicago. And we are so grateful that our speakers agreed to remix their workshop and for this webinar setting. So yeah, thank you for being with us for our first webinar of the year. And next slide. So please introduce yourself in the chat if you feel moved with your name, organization, and your favorite thing about North Carolina. I know that's really hard, so pick a top 5 thing. So we have a packed agenda today and with a ton of resources. So don't worry if you don't write everything down. Again, this is being recorded. We will have a follow-up email with resources as well. So go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. We're not going to have time to go all around, but we'd love to see who's in the room. And next slide. So I'm just going to give a quick introduction to Band and C for all of you who might not be familiar with our program. We offer technical assistance and training like this webinar, funding and convening opportunities across the state to equip organizations with the tools to build more digitally accessible communities. So we do this through ensuring that every county is covered by a locally led digital inclusion plan. We offer capacity building to practitioners and organizations across the state, including our very fun and popular digital opportunity gatherings, which we are going to have another one this fall. So please stay tuned for that. And we provide monetary support for digital inclusion projects. So please keep up to date with our offerings and other resources. Sign up for our connected newsletter. That's the best way to keep in touch. And we'll put the info on the chat and then a follow-up email about how to sign up for our newsletter. I'm seeing some things coming in about North Carolina, which I love to see. Truly, yeah, amazing places, amazing people. And I love the shout out to azaleas because my neighbor's azaleas are looking really good right now. So yeah, keep introducing yourselves. Okay, love the cows. I love that. Thank you, everyone. Next slide, please. So now onto the main event. I'm excited to introduce our topic and our panelists. So storytelling is one of the most powerful tools we have, but in digital inclusion work, it's often a piece that gets overlooked. So behind every data point is a real person, a family trying to get online, a student completing homework, a community navigating access to essential services. And data helps us measure the digital divide, but stories help us to understand it. And importantly, help decision makers really connect to these issues and the solutions. So as communities across North Carolina continue to confront gaps in access, affordability, and digital skills, storytelling offers a way to elevate community voices, highlight both challenges and successes, and show how digital inclusion drives real social change. So in summary, right, when we pair data with stories, digital opportunity becomes not just measurable, but undeniable, and it really makes people care. So I am thrilled to be joined today by our incredible colleagues at NC State's Friday Institute for Educational Innovation, Dr. Aaron Manuel, and soon to be Dr. Aaron Huggins, as well as Dr. Kenny Sharon with Cooperative Extension, and our partner in everything, Blanca Flores Gonzalez with NCDIT. And they're going to share their approaches to community-based storytelling through weaving research, practice, and policy. So by the end of this session, you'll leave with practical strategies for using research-informed storytelling translating community voices into legislative priorities, evidence-based tools that you can take back to your own work. So next slide. Again, thank you to our panelists to be here today. First, I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves, a little bit about their role, and since this webinar is all about storytelling, please share a brief digital inclusion story from your sector in North Carolina that has stayed with you. And we're going to start with Erin Huggins.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me today. I am the Associate Director of Program Evaluation and Educational Research at the Friday Institute over at NC State. And I've been conducting educational research and evaluation in the K-12 and digital opportunities space for about 8 years now. And most recently, my work is focused on leading digital opportunity planning and data collection at the state level, but also at the regional, county, and even local levels. And one of the things, so we did a lot of work in helping to shape the state's digital opportunity plan several years ago. And one of the things we did was travel across the state, listening to community members and hearing about not just their barriers, but also their successes and strengths as it related to digital opportunity. And one of the groups that really stuck with me that we spoke with were folks that were preparing for reentry after incarceration. One of the gentlemen that I spoke with had been locked up for, I want to say, 10 to 20 years. He'd never seen a smartphone. He wasn't just disconnected from the internet, though. He was completely disconnected from how society now functioned. He described to me one of his experiences his first weeks back, just trying to order food at McDonald's. Like he went up to the counter, tried to order a hamburger, and was told to turn around and go use the touchscreen kiosk behind him. And he froze. He had never seen a touchscreen like this before, had no idea what he was doing. And he described just standing there for like an hour being terrified. And this didn't just happen trying to order fast food. Like this confusion and these struggles followed him everywhere, whether it was scanning QR codes at the DMV, applying for jobs, which were now only available online, trying to open a bank account. Every single thing he did required a digital skill that he had never had the chance to learn. Now, this particular gentleman had a lot of family support. And that's not the case for a lot of people re-entering from prison. But in his case, he had actually a really happy outcome. He was able to enroll in a community college. He earned an associate's degree in human services technology, and now he's thriving. But this kind of outcome shouldn't depend on luck. Like services for people in reentry should be comprehensive and provided to everyone to make sure that they can live and thrive, not just on the inside, but once they are back out and part of society. So that was my story.
Good
Thank
afternoon.
you,
I guess
Erin.
I guess I'm
Yep.
next.
Next up is
Um,
Dr. Erin Manuel. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess. Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Aaron Manuel. I'm the other Aaron. I'm the second Aaron on the peer evaluation team at Friday Institute. I have a background in K-12 teaching and leadership. So before joining the FI team, I've worked at NCTPI as a research analyst with their summer learning evaluation, as well as some other projects around teacher working conditions and principal working conditions. So I'm pretty new to the space. So currently, I'm working on several projects with Aaron Huggins related to digital opportunity planning and digital inclusion partnerships with state and local organizations. So I'm really excited to be here today to share with you all our remix presentations. As far as my share out, I think one of the things that really stood out to me, especially being an educator in with 27 years of experience, the 2020 lockdowns really presented the greatest challenge, I think, of my career as the digital divide really threatened to leave many students in a rural district that I worked in North Carolina behind. I was at-risk coordinator for the district, and I had to find a way to circumvent the barriers that so many of our students face that we were just not aware about. So I helped mobilize a response team in our district that partnered with various state agencies and tech companies to transform our infamous yellow school buses into mobile Wi-Fi hubs. So we parked these school buses at local grocery stores, and they literally became digital lifelines for so many students. And we saw firsthand the relief of students felt in reconnecting with their teachers and peers. And the experience really shifted our district's efforts to reimagine internet connectivity. And it changed my perspective that for a lot of students, the internet is not a luxury, but truly a bridge for future opportunities.
Thank you so much, Erin. Yes, we saw that so much during COVID that that was sort of the big changing point for a lot of folks. Next, Kenny.
Hi, my name is Kenny Sharon. I work with NC State Extension. I manage the Digital Futures program, which is just the name I gave to the program where we have digital skills educators in cooperative extension offices scattered throughout the state. I wish there was one in every county, but there's not right now. Um, Cooperative Extension is a extension of land grant universities, both NC State and NC A&T State University. We're in every county. A story that I'm thrilled to share with you is a recent story that I published on our blog post and LinkedIn is something that Hannah Bradley did in Randolph County. With the uptick in the requirement for a lot of federal agencies using ID Me. Um, a lot of the older adults in that county are having issues getting their ID Me account established. So she's been seeing an uptick in helping the older adults or anyone have establish the ID Me um, login so they could access their Medicare, IRS. If you're a state employee, I had to do it to access Orbit, our retirement system type thing. So ID.me is being used a lot more, Social Security. So anyway, Hannah is helping folks overcome that barrier so they can keep access to their information, their IRS, all the different things that ID.me requires. I'm going to, that's just one story. I'm going to put a link in the chat of a collection of stories that we have. So feel free to browse those. Some of them are recent, some of them are a little bit older, but I like to tell the stories of the people doing the work in North Carolina. So thank you for participating in today's webinar.
Thanks, Kenny. And last but not least, Blanca.
Hi everyone, excited to be here today. My name is Blanca. I work as a program coordinator with the Office of Digital Opportunity, and in my role, I work with our statewide digital navigator peer network, and so it's supporting everything with digital navigation, digital skills related. And prior to coming to DIT, I actually worked at a senior center, and even though my title was support specialist, it really should have been support specialist slash tech specialist because my seniors were always coming to me with questions about their devices and computers and how to do different things. And one story that really sticks out, it's very similar to what Kenny shared. I had a senior who was a caregiver and she had a lot of health issues and she was really just stressed because her license was about to expire. And the only way that she knew to contact the DMV was to try to call them and no one was picking up the phone. And, she had heard on the news how at that point North Carolina was really backlogged with DMV appointments. So even if you could go and make an appointment, you had to do that online and they were going to be at least 3 months out. And doing a walk-in appointment wasn't really an option for her because of her caregiver obligations and her health issues. And you were having people show up at 4 or 5 a.m. at the DMV and maybe not being seen until the end of the day. So that wasn't a feasible option for her. So I asked her about, oh, maybe you qualify for online renewal. And she's like, oh, what? I wouldn't even know where to start to do that. And I can't get a hold of anyone. So I had her come in and we were able to do the process really quickly, like I think in 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And I just remember like just seeing her face of relief of being able to know that she was still going to have her license, that wasn't going to impact her, independence and ability to take care of her family and herself. But I think it really just highlights how so many of our essential services now have been shifted to be online out of convenience or what we see as convenience, but it's actually creating such a big barrier for so many communities, and we are alienating so many groups that don't have that familiarity with navigating those systems. So yeah, that was a story that really has stuck with me.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. And I think it's a helpful way to start our webinar today with these stories, right? Because it really grounds us into not only how the impacted you and your work, but also what we're seeing on the ground. And people in the chat are sharing, like, oh yeah, that's happened to me, or I've struggled with this, or I have a family member that struggled with this. And so um, now we're going to talk about how we take these stories, how we frame these stories, and why storytelling is important, how we can use it in our own work. So I'm going to pass it to Dr. Aaron Manuel. What's our why here? Why do we want to prioritize storytelling in digital opportunity work?
So thanks, Jess. So this infographic really highlights what the literature says as to why storytelling is important. So storytelling really serves as a research method or method to uncover the human why by gathering and sharing personal experiences to engage the public and communicate findings. So beyond the data collection piece, storytelling can aid with building community trust, generating authentic knowledge, and navigating power dynamics. Additionally, storytelling serves as a multi-purpose tool that can also help with cultural preservation, like passing down history and values and norms. It also can help with enacting learning and persuasion, like conveying knowledge in a memorable and influential way. And lastly, it can also foster empathy and connection. So it helps the audience understand another's experience, connection, or reflection on similarities and differences. Next slide.
Yeah, so Aaron, that's a great way of framing the why, right? And so now we're going to get into how we understand stories, how we connect them to evidence, and also the sort of the how, right? But first, before we get into that, I think we really need to talk about, as we know, as researchers, as practitioners, that we share stories. That's great. It's exciting. But, we are also telling other people's stories. That's other people's lives, potential traumas, potential issues they're having, right? So we have to do that with immense care and compassion. So, Blanca, what are some ethical considerations that matter most when collecting and sharing community stories? And we can go to the next slide.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it's definitely about having informed consent from the community members that you're wanting to work with to collect these stories, that you're being fully transparent about what you're collecting, how you're doing it, and more importantly, why you're doing it, how you're going to use it. And that it's made very clear that they have the right to withdraw permission to participate at any point, right? They might have said initially yes, and then once they find out the purpose or how these stories are going to be shared, they might decide that they don't necessarily want to participate anymore, and being respectful of that. And then just being aware of those power dynamics that exist, that you're not positioning it as something like you don't want them to feel pressured because you're providing resources or services, and that they may not get access to those if they choose not to move forward with sharing their story. And you also want to make it a very collaborative process so that the community itself feels like they have agency in the process. It's an accurate representation of what already exists within the community. You're using those personal narratives and lived experiences, but you're also avoiding that savior narrative. So there was already, highlighting the fact that there's already resilience, there was already strength within that community before your program. It wasn't necessarily a result of your program. So just acknowledging that and making sure that you're empowering that community to highlight those stories. And similar to that, you're using strength-based language, you're highlighting the many assets that are already form a part of that community. And most importantly, that you're following that do no harm standard, right? As Jess was mentioning, there is a lot of stigma still with digital skills. And so people may not want their picture and story plastered everywhere about how maybe they didn't know how to use a computer or they didn't know how to do a certain thing. So you want to be respectful of that and try to provide that option to respect anonymity if that's what people choose, but also understanding the vulnerability that it takes in sharing these stories and having that be out there about them. So just doing your best to ensure that you're respecting their privacy and their autonomy when collecting this information.
Thank you, Blanca. Yeah, that's such an important foundation of storytelling, right? I think sometimes we get really excited, rightfully so, right? Because we have a big win during a program, or we make a big impact, and it might be that the person doesn't want you to share that, right? And we have to be okay with that. And you can share another story, or share it in a way that is feels good to that person. Next slide. So we are lucky again to be joined by experts, and Dr. Manuel actually did an extensive literature review with colleagues around just what is the research saying about best practices and recommendations for storytelling. So I'm going to pass it to her to talk through that, and I'm also going to drop in the chat the literature review if you really want to nerd out about it.
Thanks, Jess. So thank you for that. And Blanca kind of hit a lot of this information too. So she's also an expert that really kind of hit some of these same things that I'll touch base on today. So yes, the past fall, our team did an extensive literature review that utilized some key frameworks like community-based participatory research and empowerment evaluation and social justice framework. And what we did is we reviewed all the literature that kind of ties to storytelling practices, and we use this as a way to identify the best practices for documenting digital opportunity impacts. And we also were using it for a project that we were working on and for the state and on our team. So the three areas that emerged regarding those best practices, and you'll see those on the left-hand side, they're bolded. And on the right-hand side, you'll see a brief description of those broader practices. So first, what we found is that it's important to prioritize authentic partnerships and shared leadership. So effective storytelling really begins by establishing genuine trust and shared leadership through deep-rooted relationships in the community. It's important also to define what community means, whether it's by geography or culture. And it's also significant and severely important that you leverage community-based organizations. That's something that really stood out numerous times in the literature. And it's important that the project work is centered on community expertise, kind of hits what Blanca was saying about building that trust. Secondly, the next thing that emerged was focus on capacity building sustainability. This practice really empowers community members through training and data collection and interpretation, ensuring that the project benefits persist long beyond the time frame in which you're conducting research or whatever your project is. It's important to co-create methods with local stakeholders and planning for cross-sector support, being with whether or not it's working with local governments or identifying philanthropic efforts. So the goal is really to work actively to reduce those long-term inequities through building skills. And lastly, um, is leveraging a locally relevant and adaptive approach. Success is measured by indicators grounded in the community's own priorities rather than externally imposed. Using creative, culturally resonant methods like digital media or photo voice or oral traditions can create a sense of agency within the community and allow those lived experiences to be authentic and compelling. So those are the three things that really emerged. And thanks, Jess, for putting that in the chat.
For sure. And I really recommend folks glancing over that literature review if you want to dig in more. Next slide. So we know stories are great and they're amazing, but we also need to use them in to make them even stronger, right? To use them in concert with data. So how do you use data to strengthen and not overshadow your community stories, and vice versa? How do you make sure that your community stories are also grounded in the data? So I'm going to pass it first to Aaron to talk a little bit about data, and then to Kenny to talk about using existing data.
Excellent. So I am going to spend very little time on this slide. If any of you on this call know me, you know that I am a super data nerd, and I will sit and talk with you about data for as long as you would like. So feel free to reach out to me after this if this is a topic that is of interest. But one of the things that I like to emphasize is that you don't have to be a data scientist to be able to use data in framing the work that you're doing, especially around storytelling. On this slide, there are a bunch of different data sources that are publicly available. There are data dashboards, things that you can use to figure out what's going on in your communities. But we're not going to sit on this today. You're going to get these slides and you can dig into this yourself. So we're going to go to the next slide. All right, so one of the data points that I look at very frequently is the American Community Survey data. I think a lot of you are probably familiar with this data set. It's updated every year and has 1 and 5 year estimates, anywhere from the national level all the way down to the census tract level, for a number of different data points. But mostly what we're looking at in the digital opportunity space is things like internet subscription rates, device access, connectivity. Um, and that's really helpful. And again, like an easy data source to just download. And I'm going to share a little bit more about that data source in a second. Another resource that can be very helpful, it can help you get like more of a granular understanding of, where broadband access exists, is the FCC broadband maps. Again, national data set, very reliable, and pretty easy to use. We can go on to the next slide. If you are interested in looking more holistically at like how other factors are involved or influencing digital inclusion in your area, the Economic Development Dashboard is a really cool tool where you can compare things like education, employment, and business growth across regions. And then I'm going to give a little shameless plug for our North Carolina Tech Resource Finder, which is going through a major overhaul right now, thanks to the help of Blanca and the folks at DIT. This is a publicly available resource where you can search for digital inclusion resources in your communities. We are going to be separating out public Wi-Fi access and public computer access and adding a button for telehealth resources very soon. So if you um, are looking through this resource and see things that are not accurate or not listed, especially around telehealth, because we're really trying to get that updated, please either email me directly, email Blanca, or go to the website itself and there's an update or add a resource button. All right, that was my plug. We can go to the next slide. And I think I just added these yesterday. Cool, they're in. Okay, so that was just like a very brief overview of what resources are available publicly that you don't have to like do like any kind of super analysis to look at. Um, and what I'm sharing here is this is a chart I created as part of a larger ACS data set that I downloaded recently. And I took county level percentages and I just mapped this stuff out in Excel. This was not that hard. I had like county, state, and like the percentages directly from the census data. For this, I was able to take some really cumbersome numbers and lay it out in a way that's like really easy, I think, to be able to see patterns across the state. And so here we're seeing the percent of households in each county that reported not having access to a digital device in their home in 2024. And again, I can see some pretty clear trends in that data. If you're looking at places like Terrell, Hyde, and Washington County in eastern North Carolina, those are those very dark counties. They have some of the lowest rates of device ownership in the state compared to their neighbors right next door, like Dare, Currituck, and Pasquotank, who are like that very light color, and are some of the wealthier, more tourist heavy portions of our state. Um, they have some of the highest rates of device adoption. And let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So if we take a little bit of a deeper dive here and look specifically at people at households access to large screen devices, so I'm talking about people that have either a desktop, a laptop, or a tablet in their home, we can see that this divide is growing even bigger in these areas with households, specifically in the areas we were just talking about, having anywhere from 32 to 40% of those households not having any kind of large screen device in their home. And we can see similar trends in other areas of the state, like the southeastern portion of the state, like Bladen, Robeson, Columbus counties, out in the western state, or out in the western counties like Graham, and also up like more in the northeastern portion. And you might ask yourself, okay, so why does that matter? Most people have a cell phone in those places, right? Isn't that good enough? Well, I think that's when it's real, like when these stories that we are telling really become important. If we're talking about the homework gap, for example, like I think Erin mentioned that briefly in her story, this is a discrepancy between the number of students that have access to a computer at home to help them complete their homework and those that don't. These numbers matter a lot, and they tell a larger story about the educational gaps that we're seeing in the state. For kids in Terrell, Hyde, Graham, and Robinson, that's where we're seeing the highest numbers of a lack of a large screen device. This issue is real for them. These are kids that are trying to write term papers on their cell phones. These are kids that, if we're talking about if we're talking about access to the internet, are doing their homework in a McDonald's parking lot. And these are huge problems. And I know this, like I've been there. I have talked to these families. and there are real stories behind these numbers and they really matter. And when we look at trends, let's go to the next slide. When we look at trends over time, we can also see that for most areas, these challenges have been shrinking over time, right? The percentage of people or households, for example, that have access to large screen devices is actually increasing almost everywhere across the state, except for these 7 counties where it's actually growing higher. Um, and so you can see like Tyrrell County, again highlighted here, the percentage of people that do not have access to a large screen device to be able to access work, access telehealth, do their homework, any of these things has increased almost 5% over the past 5 years. So I think my point is here again, you don't need to be a data scientist to access these data points. You don't have to pull your own results. You can access like live reports, state data dashboards, where all of this can be summarized for you, and it can really help you leverage the data to highlight the needs in your communities. So sorry if I went over. I get really passionate about this.
No
I think
worries.
I'm
Next
next, right?
slide. Yep, go for it, Kitty.
Yep.
Walk us through some
So yeah,
reports.
so I'm not Erin. I don't geek out on data like she does. I admire her and I'm a little bit jealous of her abilities, but that said, there is a lot of pre-published or um, pre-published data out there and reports. For example, if you're talking about workforce and how it relates to digital skills, the National Skills Coalition published a report a few years ago that shows the number of digital skills and how having a digital skills increases your annual salary. So if you're trying to make an argument in your community or your county about the need for digital skills education, tie that back to workforce and workforce development. So that gives us those numbers. If you're having a conversation about cybersecurity, well, the FBI just released their 2025 report on the number of people who are subject to scams. I'll put that link in the chat in just a second. But use that data to show and to provide the evidence-based information that you need to make that argument. It also helps when you're actually helping someone with this issue to let them know that they're not the only one. A lot of times, um, scams and stuff make you feel really isolated. You could just simply share that data and say, look, you are not the only one that fall prey. I'm a perfect example of that. I clicked on something yesterday that I wasn't supposed to click on, and I got locked out of my systems. And I was lucky enough to have a campus-wide IT system that I could call into and get reestablished. But yeah, it happens to everyone. I was a little embarrassed. I was on the phone with my son, who's just graduated from UNC Charlotte with cybersecurity. He's like, "Ah, I think you got hacked." So, and he kind of laughed at that because he knows I talk about this stuff all the time. But anyway, I will also want to say, um, Amanda, I feel your pain. So, there, so use those existing data resources. Another one I want to give a shout out to our friends at the North Carolina Rule Center. Um, Dalton Bailey over there is a great data person like Aaron. And the Rule Center has county profiles set up on their dashboard, and I'll share that link in your. So look for those existing data reports and such, and go from there. So that's what I provide, that evidence base, that weight that data brings to your storytelling. Use those reports.
Thanks, Kenny. So we're going to move on to our next segment. So now we've talked about the why of storytelling, how you can link data, existing data to your stories to make them even more impactful, whether you're a data nerd like Aaron and can really dig into those raw numbers, or whether you're like Kenny and you're looking through reports from from other groups nationally or statewide. And just a side note, like Kenny said, email folks like Aaron, email folks like the folks at the Rural Center, like they want to help you with data. So if you have data questions, reach out. So now we're going to talk about how we turn those stories, those data rich, community story rich, into policy priorities. So, Dr. Manuel, how do stories help shape policy priorities at different levels, local, regional, or state? And we can go to the next slide.
Thanks, Jess. So this infographic, which I had used Google Gemini to generate, to kind of gives us a sense about the levels of governing entities. So as you see at the top, you have a national all the way down to the local level. And I want you guys to envision that this is a funnel. As you are near the top, you're broad and you're more of a national perspective. As you move towards the bottom of the funnel, you are looking at more of a local perspective. So if you want to shape policy, it's important to target the right level. I think that's the biggest takeaway from this. And storytelling can be used as a mechanism to kind of help you with this. So in terms of setting policy priorities, think about each level and their function. This infographic kind of helps you do that. For example, the national is the architect. They set the federal guidelines. They set those structures in place, that the strategic infrastructures and the standards around certain um, sectors. The regional is the distributor and the integration and capacity, and the local at the bottom here in the yellow is the provider and implementation and experience. So as you define your digital opportunity work or whatever sector you may be working in, it's important to target these levels. Keep in mind that it's important to identify not only the appropriate level, but the audience, the level's function, and whose or what story will be shaped or informed by that policy priority. So you have to think about your ask in terms of that. Next slide.
Yeah, so now moving on to just what do I want to hear from all of our panelists on this one, okay? Based on what Aaron just said and what we've been talking about, what suggestions or recommendations do you have for folks on how to get stakeholders to care about these stories? And I'll start with Kenny.
You really have to make it personal. You have to really relate it back and make it relevant to the people listening to you. And you have to make sure you're framing it in the right way. So you got to pay attention to your audience. So if you're talking to the community that you're trying to drum up support for your program, well, talk about the impacts and personal impacts of people in the community. Well, if you're talking to policymakers, you have to change that story a little bit to frame it in a way that will identify them. What's your return on investment? What's your workforce training going to look like? How's that going to help my community? So you really have to make it personal and have to speak to the interests that those people that you're talking to represent. And I'll leave it there. I'll leave it there for now.
Thanks, Kenny. Blanca?
Yeah, I think definitely leading into maybe the pain points that people experience. So if you're talking to a community of rural residents, they are probably really familiar with the struggles. And I mean, I live in a rural area, finding an affordable and reliable internet connection, or even just how we were talking about how to navigate different digital systems. And I think along with that as well, like a clear call to action and thinking about what you're wanting to get out of sharing this story. So you want to make people feel that they have the ability to contribute. So it could be that you're sharing it to, just raise awareness that this is a need in the community, or you want to do it, or maybe you're sharing it with a commissioner who has the power to designate funding to get more resources to continue this work. So I think just making sure that whatever message you're tailoring your story, or whatever audience you're tailoring your story to, you also have a clear call to action for that specific audience.
Thanks, Blanca. Next, let's hear from Aaron M, and then we'll do Aaron H.
Thanks. I think these are all great points. Kind of hit on what I was going to speak to a little bit about humanizing the data. You can use things like case studies or a narrative of one person affected by the issue. Again, that empathy connection is really important. And then you can use data or a statistic to show the scale of the problem. Another thing you can do is look at ways to help problem solve with stakeholders, like bringing groups of stakeholders together that you know have similar interest and finding ways to identify and problem solve around your concern to get input around it so that way you can support people having a sense of ownership.
Awesome. And I agree with everything that everyone has just said. Definitely, I would say lead with what we all share. Like, I think most people can agree that access to digital opportunity shouldn't depend on your zip code, your income, or whether you have a device at home. I think most people can agree that we deserve dignity, connection, and a fair shot to participate in everyday life. And I think when you frame it around shared values, people are going to listen to you before they ever see any statistics. And it's really easy to get bogged down in a lot of like complicated data. I don't think that's what people need. Um, I think if you are really trying to get people interested, figure out first, what is it? What do you all have in common? What is that thing that you all care about? Then find that one data point, two, like one or two, make it simple, make it a statistic everybody can understand. Tell that one local story of somebody they know, and then tell them what you want them to do with that. Like, it's great. I have so much empathy. I care so much, but that's not going to change anything. Like, make people see how they can be a part of actionable change. And so that's kind of my thing. Like, pick a story, pick a data point, pick an ask, and then show them how they can be part of the solution.
Next slide. And I think this next slide is for you, Erin, as
It is.
well.
It
So
is.
I'll
And
just
it's
let
a lot
you
of the
keep
same stuff.
rolling.
So yeah, again, kind of in a similar vein, I think the big if you're trying to make a shift from if you want to make that policy translation concrete, you've got to shift from awareness of the issue to ownership of the issue, right? So again, start with those shared programs, like or those shared values. Help your policymakers, help your community members, help your funders see how digital inclusion connects with what they care about. That might be economic growth, that might be education, workforce readiness, public health. If they are going to see if they see their priorities reflected, they're going to stay engaged in what you're talking about. Um, as I said before, make that issue personal, okay? Tell them one real story from their district or county, not just statewide averages. People care when they can recognize the place or the problem as their responsibility. Um, make sure you're pairing it with just enough data. Again, not too much. Use simple, relatable numbers, and then show people when these solutions or issues are funded, what policy shifts can happen. Data can help the people that you're talking to feel more confident that that the story they're hearing isn't just an exception, it's a pattern, it's part of a larger issue that needs to be addressed, and they can help fix this, and they should be helping to fix it. I think we've talked about this before, as Blanca mentioned, but like we've also got to make sure we're respecting people's lived experiences. Like people's voices matter, their experiences matter, and we cannot boil them down to a single statistic either. What we should be doing is bringing people's voices in and letting them help explain the reality of this pressing matter. And then whether it's fortunate or unfortunate, I don't know, but a lot of policymakers want to see a return on their investment. A lot of funders want to see a return on their investment. So showing them what action can unlock, whether that's a stronger workforce. I'm sorry, somebody's knocking on my door. I'm going to get that in a second. Um, it might be better educational outcomes. Like helping to show them why they need to make action now feel obvious and make it feel true is really important. And then again, like as I said before, give people a role. Tell them what you want them to do. I need you to fund a pilot program. I need you to champion my policy. I need you to share a story. I need you to convene these partners. When you give them those clear, actionable steps, it helps them see themselves not just part of the problem, but part of that solution.
Thanks, Erin.
I'm not part of
So we're at our next segment, which we're going to talk about how do we frame and take action on these stories, right? So we know it's important that stories are inspiring us as digital opportunity leaders, but also leading to real material change that helps people in their day-to-day lives. So Erin's back. Okay, good. Because I think, Erin, you do have the next slide.
I think so. Sorry, I had to step
It's
away. Someone
okay.
was knocking at my door.
So let's talk a little bit about how we frame our stories.
Yes.
Next slide.
And can we actually click on the Canva link so we can see that? Um, we'll give you all access to this too. I hope it's useful for you. I love this infographic so much because I think it really helps to frame what we're talking about in a very easy to use and actionable way. So this Canva link, it's an infographic. It outlines 6 different storytelling frameworks. It can help you align your stories with your data and your policy goals. And it's not just about making the work sound better, but it's about helping to make your impacts clearer to the and for the people that you need to reach. So each frame is going to start with a different entry point. So some are going to lead with the top one. It's like a single household narrative. This can help to humanize the issues that you're talking about. Others are focused more on this kind of before and after change. That could be where you're showing a return on your investment to somebody who is, you're asking to provide funding to do X, Y, or Z. This other framework shows system complexity. So looking at like the day in the life of a digital navigator, while others are going to show you maps that can help you to show the need in a very specific place or like opportunity cluster, which was what I shared earlier with those maps that I'd created with the ACS data. You've also got, combining quotes with data pairing, really showing that community voice and the narratives, as well as those counterfactual stories. Like, what would happen if this didn't happen? What would happen if I didn't have this funding? If this policy wasn't enacted? That can be very, very powerful. And so, what these frames have in common is that they can help decision makers move, I think, from just this area of empathy where, yeah, I care about this story you're telling, I care about this data point, to actual like evidence and in action. So, it shows that digital inclusion isn't just a failure in this one area, it's like a systems issue, and there are going to be there are policy solutions that we can enact. Um, and so hopefully these will help you tailor your stories depending on whether you're speaking to a funder or a legislator or an agency or just to the public. And if I can give you one key takeaway, it's not to look at these as which story am I going to tell? It's which frame helps your audience understand why action matters.
Thank you, Erin. And yes, you will get this Canva handout afterwards with all these example frames. So thank you so much. And thank you, Crystal, for sharing those slides. So next slide, I'm going to pass it over to Blanca and Dr. Manuel to talk through about how to sort of frame and set the context of stories and give some specific examples.
So when you're bringing together different stories, I think Coalition really highlights how stories can build that connective tissue among different stakeholders, or even similar stakeholders and groups. So, for example, we have a state digital navigator peer network, and that digital navigators are the source of those lived experience stories. They're on the ground every day working with different community members and really seeing what needs are there and what resource, like what's working and what resources are still needed. E2D also does, which is a device refurbisher in the state. They've done a great job of providing that full circle kind of human mission behind the work. So they hire students to help refurbish the computers that are then given back to that same community. So just making that full circle narrative, like Erin was talking about, that's kind of setting that frame of those stories that they're sharing out. And even the work that IEI has done with working with the COGS and how they've been able to align diverse stakeholders to come together who otherwise maybe had different priorities or were working in different realms to come together to move forward on digital opportunity planning and expanding that work as well. So it's really transforming policy goals into like a core human mission.
And just to kind of round this out, the legislative mapping, there are two things that we've done in our own work in partner with DIT was legislative mapping, where we actually took an opportunity to identify who supported what policy around infrastructure, technology in the House and the Senate. And we just mapped it out on an Excel spreadsheet to get a sense about who we can really, who needs to hear the stories. You're mapping that information out. So that's just a really good strategy you can use around understanding those policy priorities. Next slide.
Okay, yeah, I think I'm up on this one. Um, I mean, recent example, like 15 minutes ago example, or maybe a little bit longer than that. So I'm at a session today with Dogwood Health Trust, and they're working on doing the next round of funding for the western part of the state. And I was in a session where they were mapping out where their programs have reached. And in that physical mapping out, they realized there may be some gaps in those areas, like Burke County. I'll use an example. Burke County is somewhere that is in the Dogwood district or Dogwood footprint, but it's outside a cog, which they've been working through some cogs. Anyway, I was talking to Dogwood Health Trust folks, and I was like, you know, when I apply for funding for my digital skills educator, I'm also going to put some wording in there about how an existing cooperative extension employee could get a supplement to add digital skills programming to their work, so we can maybe fill in that gap a little bit for that. So why I'm saying this is you really have to tailor your message and then communicate. If it's a funder, do something like that. If it's a policymaker, you have to sort of look at the systemic impact. You have to really frame your message in the way you communicate your stories. I'll stop there. I know we're running a little bit behind.
So Aaron H, take us home. Sort of how do we make all these points today? How do we make that actionable?
Oh, I'm muted. Yeah, so I mean, I think I kind of alluded to this earlier, but like I think especially using that infographic that we shared, think about it in terms of like what data is really important. Pick your data point, pick your story, figure out who you're framing that story for, and then make an ask. Like give people specific actionable steps that you want them to be able to take. And I'll stop there because I think we've already said it all.
And I'm going to end next slide. Um, as part of this original workshop at Net Inclusion, our panelists facilitated um, a little like workshop, a little activity around framing your story, and they created an amazing template which we're going to share today to help you map out your story with your project or your team, right? So it goes over what we've been talking about today. Who's your audience? Who's the community? What are the services? What's the delivery? And then like what's the ask, right? And so I'm gonna put in the chat, and again, this will be shared out to you as well. It's the template for this activity to help you frame things. It's gonna open a Google Doc that'll force you to make a copy. But yeah, take a look. Um, if you have some questions, we have a couple minutes for questions. So let's stop sharing screen. But I'm excited to share that template with you, and I won't um, go into that any more details. And you can email our panelists if you have questions about the template. But any questions for our panelists? I think we probably have time for one or two, and you can put them in the chat or come off mute.
While we're waiting on questions, can I say something? Um,
Yeah.
so if you've had your email open during this session at all, you all probably because who you are and in this space got an email from Maggie Woods. Um, we could not tell some of these stories without her leadership in this space.
Thank you,
So I
Kenny.
just want to take the opportunity to say thank you to Maggie. I know she's not on here, but Blanca, you could tell her. So anyway, sorry about that.
Yeah, Maggie has been our champion through this process and will continue to champion digital opportunity in her new role at the Rural Health Transformation Grant Project. But
Yeah, Kenny, you're making me cry too. So,
yeah, it's an emotional week.
but yeah, I echo what you said, Kenny. Like our state would not be where it is today without her support and her leadership. And I, I'm just so grateful for her service and her dedication.
And I definitely wouldn't have a job without her because she started my program, Band and C. And so she is, made the blueprint to for this work and to sort of how Band and C we want to support you as practitioners to do your work to the best of your abilities across the state.
Yeah.
Any questions? Any questions on any of the resources we've shared? Again, we have a pretty meaty follow-up email coming to you all with a ton of resources that we didn't even mention that our panelists put together. So get excited for that. And I'll put my email in the chat because um, if you all ever have ideas of webinars that you would like to see or things that you would like or experts you would like to hear from in the field, please email me, let me know, um, and love to hear from y'all. Any last words from our panelists around storytelling or wins that you've had through storytelling? Let's end on a high note.
I'll
Going
just
off script.
I'll say one thing I don't think that we touched on that I think we talked about in the original presentation is how this type of storytelling can be used by us as people that are working in the field, but can also be used to help empower our communities to be able to tell their own stories. And I think that is very important.
Absolutely, yeah. Sometimes we are, helping the catalyst to just gather those stories and reflect them back, right? And say like, hey, we collected these stories. Here's a bunch of quotes. Go forth and use this to lobby other things and lobby for other things. Great point, Erin.
And I think it's that, like the actionable piece of it. Like we're all good collectors of stories, but it's how do you make it actionable for a community that I think people often find very daunting. They don't know how to go about it, how to start, like, and giving them that power to be able to leverage their stories and their own data for change.
And I don't know if that coming soon. I don't know how much we can talk about this, but Erin, the Friday Institute, and us at Bandancy will be working on some story mapping with NCDIT and Blanca to sort of, like we said, we've been collecting all this data over the years of all these amazing digital opportunity projects across the state. And so we're going to hopefully be creating some story maps this year, again, as a way to help you all leverage the work you're doing and to maybe see like, hey, look, my program had this impact here, or hey, wow, there's a gap here. So, well, I'm sure we'll do a webinar or something to release that later in the year. But
Yeah,
okay, we're at time. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead,
I was gonna
Erin.
say it's just gonna look so good. We've gotten
It's really
mock-ups
exciting.
already from DIT and they look amazing. So I'm really excited. Sorry.
No, you're fine. Okay, we're at time. We don't want to keep you all over, but thank you so much again